So we're going to talk about, you know, four different things. And the first being the network diagram. Network diagrams are mostly a point in time, but these are I think is the most critical thing that your MSP provider or IT consultant should be giving you. Also, switches are often overlooked. That's another typical case where problems arise, and most of the time, people overlook switches. So the third being cabling inspections. Now, this is a kind of a difficult one. Um, a lot of MSPs, particularly in the industrial space, are accustomed to do cabling inspections, but not so the case for IT providers, like your typical MSP. And also, we'll end the discussion with the server room, um, the don'ts specifically of how a server room is, common problems that I see for this topic. So, a network diagram, these are some of the common problems for network, for customers. Um, the first being the lack of visibility on how devices are connected. Just having that view of the network, it's really critical, not only for you to actually know how your network is growing, but also how all devices are connected. The data flow. Um, are there any gaps that you need to pay attention, or your MSP needs to pay attention? Also, what type of ports, the cable type. Some of the diagrams you can actually embed not only the cable type, but also the length. And also these some of the customers, some of the MSPs provide you with a network diagram, but sometimes it's like a point in time diagram, and that diagram never gets updated. So that's also another issue. And also sometimes the MSP or the client sees this activity as time consuming because it's billable. So a network diagram typically, just a high level diagram is provided, with a few connections or the most critical devices. Another topic is the switches. Many people, especially for MSPs, try to focus their troubleshooting efforts on some other areas, but rather first on the switches. So switches are often overlooked for maintenance, for scheduled maintenance, specifically when you try to upgrade firmware or versions of your infrastructure. MSPs will try to just consider the switch as a dumb device, and that's not really the case today. It's also the second most common reason for network issues. Your cabling being the first. So switches also communicate how your network behaves. If you don't check your event logs, your error logs on the switches, then you really don't have, or you have some sort of tool to monitor the switches. You really don't know how your network is behaving. Some issues arise when the switches are poorly configured or incorrectly configured. There could be times that a specific device, such as voice networks, tend to communicate with an um, external activation server provider. Sometimes cloud devices now also have to, connect between the internal and the cloud provider, and that creates sort of a lagging, or you say complexity with your network. So the switches are also poorly configured to accept this type of new communication once you change something. Also, newer devices are also much more improved in terms of security. Some have, security features that you weren't aware of, or the MSP isn't aware of. So they sometimes, they configure the switches very quickly and overlook the compatibility with all switches that exist on your network. and then there's this gap of where's the issue coming from. So that's another issue that MSPs tend to overlook. And also, sometimes the switches are poorly sized or not of a fully managed type. So what I mean by poorly sized is that the switch itself, it was meant for, say, like an entry-level network, a few devices here and there, and suddenly there's a influx of data because there's backups or there's data transmitted to a cloud provider, and then the switch cannot handle, and then there's also spanning tree loops, even though there's protection. There's it could be other things, maybe the protocols being used, the monitoring going on also on your network is goes through the switches, and sometimes if those switches are not fully managed, it creates more bottlenecks for your network. Another thing that is very critical, it's already done in the infrastructure space, but in the IT space is really overlooked, is the common problems with cabling. Specifically, it could be the incorrect cabling coming from your server room between devices, the cable length, sometimes it goes over 100 meters. Also, there's cabling arranged in an incorrect fashion, or people step on it on the cubicles, they kind of put their feet on them, there's problems. So those are the sort of things that you should actually, your MSP should be looking for at first. Like some of the problems, like the cable is poorly installed. When I mean poorly installed, I mean that the cabling is just hangs in some of the server rooms or some areas. It could be next to a heating furnace, where could be next to a power cable. Power box. And sometimes these newer devices also are incompatible. For example, there's still some Cat5 cabling in some of the buildings. I've seen some of the buildings that still have the old Cat3 cabling. And then new devices, new switches don't actually support those types of cable types. So those are the things that you need to look for. And then the throughput, some of those older cablings cannot withhold. With the new internet speeds, over 1 gigabit now, they used to support 100 Mbps. Now, with the new switches, the new internet providers that support incoming 1 gigabit per second, and then you want to support that 1 gigabit per second internally, that also creates problems. And then we end with the server room don'ts. Many times I've seen closets, like kind of like a closed room with no air conditioning, no breathability, and pretty much that chokes those servers, and then the servers, they overheat. There's not proper cooling. Sometimes the servers are mixed with other non-IT equipment. Could be tools, could be something else, cleaning supplies. I've seen servers actually stand on tables, uh, mixed with paper, and it was a complete mess. Also, the location of the server, it matters. Some of these server rooms are right at the entrance of the business, where people can actually go in and steal something or insert a USB thumb stick. They have poor security access, no change management. Sometimes, if a contractor comes in, makes a change, there's no way to track who did the change and what was done. And also we come to the issue of lack of poor cabling management. Um, Cables all hang all over. So when a contractor, when an MSP comes in or a consultant comes in to do update network diagrams, it's really impossible to actually track down how the connections are made. So that's pretty much my humble opinion on the first few things, the first few weeks that the MSP should be looking at your network. It's a little time consuming at first, but these are the things that will keep your business up and running. So don't overlook all of these things at first when your MSP arrives and suggests, you should be doing this and that, because this is what keeps your network, either when you host it internally or to the cloud, in good state. So that's it. This is Ivan Barrera with Barrera Technologies.